Hello, 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 and welcome back to, as always, another very exciting episode of Mind the Force, a nerdy podcast about Star Wars and mental health. I'm your first illustrious host, Kristine Smith, joined by my equally, if not more, illustrious co-host, James Abadi. James, how are you this lovely Tuesday evening?
Not too spiffy. How about you?
I'm extra spiffy. I'm having a spiffy kind of day.
Spiffy
Um,
good or spiffy bad?
I
As
mean,
if I'm
I
not
think,
spiffy.
I think spiffy's good. I've never heard of spiffy used in a negative context. Have
Oh,
you?
smart, stylish. Yeah. Oh, so I want to be spiffy then.
Yeah,
Okay,
we want
so
to
I'm
be
very spiffy.
spiffy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
I'm too
yeah.
spiffy. Spiff.
You can never be too spiffy in my eyes, James. So we are back at it with episode I'm very excited about. This was it's less of a character analysis and more of like a conceptual analysis, I guess. We are looking at everyone's favorite NPCs, as James so eloquently puts it, the clones. To be specific, the clone army. And we're looking at personhood in the war machine. And pretty much how we have this collective body that is the clone army, but we see how like their individuality shines through and their personality shines through and how that affects everyone's journey. And of course we have the OG clones that we love, that who will all have episodes in the future. I don't want there to ever be an insinuation that this is all there will be. Like we're going to cover Rex and Cody and Echo and Fives and like all the Bad Batch, like all the amazing clones that do have those like specific storylines. But this is just a look at the clones in general and also how they speak to our own like modern day military and those experiences that shine through. This is an episode very near and dear to my heart for reasons we will get into later. And I'm excited to be here. We have a very exciting guest, licensed clinical social worker, Stacy Pelletieri. Really hope I didn't butcher her name. Um, and she joins us in a little bit for a wonderful conversation that you guys are really gonna appreciate it. We really hit a lot of nails on the head. Are you excited, James? Are you excited to get into the nitty gritty?
100%. I'm more excited than a clone is to get into the Clone Wars. Let's just put it that way.
I mean, I think we all are. Um, but before we dive on into it, of course, we have the little business before the big business. To stay up to date on everything Mind the Force, please check us out in all the places. There's mindtheforce.com and of course Instagram and Facebook. We are now officially on Blue Sky, so give us a little old follow. We also are on Substack, where you can find additional thoughts. So not just the first thoughts, not just the cute reels with our shining faces. Pretty much the ideas and thoughts that we don't get out on the podcast, we are throwing on Substack. So, pop over there and subscribe, and you can get tons of bonus material. It's a very exciting development. For
We're
all the
we're,
latest
uh,
episodes,
we're growing at an accelerated rate.
we are we are growing at an accelerated rate. That will be hysterical later. You all stick around now to get that pun. For all the latest episodes, please follow, share, and subscribe on all your favorite streaming platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Pocket Cast, Castbox, etc., etc. Hit the link tree. You'll find all the stuff to do all the things, and you'll have all the fun, and then you're gonna go and you're gonna give us a 5-star rating, because that's how the internet knows we're cool. Jazz hands. And please shoot us an email with all your big Star Wars thoughts, feels, and questions, and smoke at mindtheforcepodcast@gmail.com. Listen to this pod, then go do all those things.
And we would be remiss not to give you a content spoiler warning because what are we? We're civilized. So Mind the Force podcast is a retrospective on Star Wars characters across all Star Wars content. All films, TV shows, novels, comic books, and video games are up for discussion. If you don't want some aspect of currently released Star Wars content to be spoiled, just flee the battlefield like a clone who's just, realized how terrible war is.
Right? But like a clone whose like mind chip was disabled before Order 66 came through. Like
Just like
it's
that. Just
run,
bolt.
just skedaddle. Just skedaddle your
Just look
ass
for the
out of
nearest
here.
port. Yep, fly away. Fly out of this planet.
Right? Right, grab yourself an escape pod and get that fuck out.
Hyperspace.
It's a very exciting episode. I'm really excited for this topic. It came to me and has kind of taken on a life of what it could be as far as the discussion of essentially the modern military war complex. Let's get into it.
Yeah, I
Um,
spend about an hour every day of my life just thinking about the clones from Star Wars, and yeah, so it's percolating.
right, as it should, like a freshly brewed cup of coffee.
Java
Um,
juice.
we were very happy to be joined today, as I mentioned, by Stacy Pelletieri. She is the co-founder of Long Island Counseling Services, as well as one half of the podcast team of Why People Do What They Do. It's a great podcast, a mental health podcast that I was a guest on last year when I was ridiculously pregnant.
Go check it out.
Go check it out. And she'll have another fun announcement for us at the end of the pod. So we look forward to that. Without further ado, here's our wonderful conversation with Stacy. Hi, Stacy. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. How are you? Are you excited to dive into the personhood of the clone army?
I am actually so excited. These are like two of my favorite topics, psychology and Star Wars. What better way to end my evening?
I mean, that's what we do here. We hope we do it well. We try our
Yeah.
best. I was excited to get the prompts over to you. So just to give everyone an idea of what we're going to be discussing with Stacy and getting her professional opinion on. Obviously, as usual, I'm going to read you the prompts and then we're going to dive right into it.
All right.
So, first prompt was: the clones were created to function as a collective military force, and much of the galaxy sees them that way. They are discussed in terms of numbers, strategy, and effectiveness, rather than as individuals with inner lives, relationships, and personal fears. Though each clone is a human being with distinct thoughts, bonds, and emotional experiences, they are often spoken about as one mass, the clone army. Their humanity is often overshadowed by their utility. This dynamic mirrors the way military conflict is often understood at a distance. Public conversation tends to focus on operations, casualties, political outcomes, and national interests, while the lived reality of the individual soldier can fade into the background. The clones invite reflection on what happens when people are absorbed into a larger narrative of war and no longer seen as individuals with families, memories, vulnerabilities, and lives beyond the role they perform. So, Stacy, what came up for you with this? What were kind of your initial thoughts?
Oh, so many things. So many things. So the first thing, I mean, it was really in like the first thing you said. You cannot create a human being to be anything other than a human being. Even though that might be the intention, right, of a clone army, is to create a human being to be this machine that has purpose and not life. But a human being is a human being nonetheless. And so, the brain still exists, right? And so all of the needs of the human brain and of the human spirit is going to exist, even though the attempt to suppress is going to be very strong here, obviously, because the purpose is very strong. It is all about just feeding the need of this army. You're here to be compliant, and you're here to fight, and you're here to fit a purpose. But yet, a human being, is going to develop experientially. And what that means is that regardless of what you try to create is their experience, they're still going to be thirsty. They're going to be hungry. They're going to be scared. They're going to be cold. They're going to be tired. They're going to get sick. They're going to interact with all of the other human beings around them that are also being suppressed. So you're going to have definitely this brotherhood and this trauma bond between all of the clones. They're all going through this together, and they're all experiencing this odd, circumstance that goes completely against humanity together. And so, I think about human development, and I think about the development of executive functions. And we developed impulse control, and we develop organization and time management and emotional regulation, and we develop all of these things, and the brain is constantly growing. You can't suppress that. And what's interesting, if you're going to raise and train an army, the army needs to grow, it needs to develop, they need to learn skills. So in the act of teaching skills, in the act of teaching compliance alone, you are going to need that human being to develop. And you can't take a human being and say, only develop this and not that. It's going to develop everything. It's going to develop all. And so one of the most advanced executive functions is metacognition. Metacognition is the act of thinking about your own thinking. It's what we're doing right now. What do I think? What comes up for me? What do I feel? How do I experience this? What does this experience mean to me? What are my thoughts about this experience? Right? We're utilizing working memory, we're utilizing experience and emotion, and we're bringing so many different parts of our neurology together just to be able to have this conversation. And the reality is, for the clones, even though their purpose isn't to be human, they are. And so you're going to have the mental health outcomes that you would in any situation where you suppress the human identity. And you're going to have anxiety, and you're going to have depression. You're going to have lack of self-esteem, lack of self-worth. And I think most importantly, you're going to have a drive or a motivation or a fight for survival. And so what's interesting, and I don't know that much about the clones in depth, even though I love Star Wars and I've seen a lot of Star Wars, I haven't watched a lot of the middle stuff. So you can school me a little bit about this, but the clones don't all have the same experience, right? Like they start to kind of become human.
They go astray.
Right? And they go astray.
That's why they were discarded.
Yeah. Yeah. And their names were numbers, right?
Yes, they all had like code numbers is how they were identified. Yeah. Really, they're the pieces of individuality they would go on to develop were what they chose for themselves. So they picked their own names, they had their own kind of hairstyles, they personalized like their armor, and really as time went on, they craved that individuality. Like they had the brotherhood.
Tattoos, shave their hair. Well, much like droids, they were designated numbers, and over time, R2D2 becomes R2, ARTOO, rather than the numerical units. They're meant to be chattel. They had no choice in this, droids and clones. So you see that similarity from the base, the nature part, but nurture inevitably expresses itself.
Well, I find that point really interesting with something Stacy said, just as far as the process of the development. Because you think about, like, we always see clones when they're adults, when they're the soldiers that are ready to go off to fight in the Clone Wars. But these clones, like, they didn't come out of their pods. I'm not sure what they were grown in. They didn't come out full grown. They came out as infants, as children, and they were imbued with accelerated growth. So I think they grew quite fast. I'm not sure exactly how fast.
I believe it was half the life cycle of a normal
but they
human.
still
so I
grew,
believe by
right?
they grew.
Yeah, they still do. They grew. They
in a narrow contained guardrail.
Yeah, like in like this facility on Camino, they're being raised in quite this like bubble vacuum. But they're still children, and they're growing, and their minds are developing, and they're going at this accelerated rate. And so their minds are also developing at this accelerated rate, and they're bred to be super smart and like super observant. And so it's kind of like life fast forward on 1,000. And so yeah, what does that do to the psyche? Even if you're being raised in this quite like sterile controlled environment, like you said, the human experience will still break through.
It's inevitable. It's impossible not to have the human experience break through when you're dealing with humans, right? And I think really like where I get stuck is like, you're teaching them compliance. You're teaching them for a purpose. This is my purpose, and you're teaching them how to fight and how to react and what to do and how to, respond in certain scenarios and how to listen and how to follow an order, right? So in order for them to learn that, they have to learn a lot of other things too, right? So they're developing as human beings just the way any human being would develop as a human being. But you're trying so hard to suppress a natural part of their growth and a natural part of their development that you can only suppress so far. It's going to show up. And the more you fight it and the more you try to suppress it, that person is either going to spiral into depression or they're going to fight back. But either way, there's going to be an outcome that's inevitable.
That's 100% true. And you do see that expression, exactly what you just described, and their psyches in the various Star Wars media. For instance, the Bad Batch and whatnot, there's many rebellious clones who eventually, over time, do escape from that. In the thick of war, when they have that human relationship with a Jedi general or civilians, sometimes their humanity takes over and their programming is like, what's going on? And they choose in that binary choice what is actually right in some cases. However, there is an extra variable. They are implanted with a chip that ultimately makes them kill the Jedi. That's why the Jedi are extinct in Star Wars through Order 66. Palpatine installed it as a backdoor, so they had their growth and breeding, as well as an override system, which some escaped. So ultimately, they really tried to enslave them. And you see this in the comics too. There's a knight errant in the comic. They're growing children at normal speed. They're like Jedi in the sense that they take them away. They grow them in a pod. Have it's like a prison cell. They have a commode, food, and a training of how to be these warriors. Then they turn off all the lights to make them panic, because when the regimen is broken and it goes in the dark, they become hateful, and the Sith feeds off their hate. So in a way, that and the clones, it's all how they kind of plan to throw a wrench into it for chaos, but for the clones, they didn't want to. Palpatine, the Emperor, was using them as a sham army to centralize power. And he knew they were, they had a short lifespan and they wouldn't last forever. They were disposable. So they became like Vietnam vets or Afghan vets. You see them on the streets of New York City, for instance, where I'm from. After a while, it's like, once we've had use of you, you're no longer useful. Now, we'll just move on to the next army. And that's kind of how the clones and those children were valued. But like this whole discussion's point is, they're humans. They feel things. Things may not go according to plan. When they counter that plan, they have a psychic break, a psychic shock.
Yeah.
And it's very traumatic.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I'm hearing when I'm listening to you talk is I'm hearing trauma. When you induce panic in somebody, when you bring somebody into fight or flight, right? And that's one of the, I think, most important pieces here is that you can't take the fight or flight out of a human. That's going to exist no matter what, because that's our survival instinct. And you need that survival instinct in war, right? So they need them to have fight or flight, because fight or flight is what's going to, keep them compliant. I have to do what I'm meant to do, otherwise there'll be a consequence, right? This is my programming. And so in, forcing them into panic, forcing them into that scenario is reinforcing really a trauma response. Right, so what you're talking about is trying to clone them into having no other purpose other than to serve this battle. But in the same token, you're also instilling trauma response in them, and you're giving them a reason to have a trauma response by having the experience of trauma.
And what movie lifts or echoes what you're saying? Rambo, the first one, First Blood.
I saw it like 100 years ago.
Well, he goes to Vietnam, and the end is like, it's not an action hero at the end. It's a traumatic breakdown, and he's like, and he's crying. He's like upset for all the things that he's done and for what was forced upon him. He's young, thrown into this war, comes back. Even like Deer Hunter, returning, it's not the same after playing, Russian roulette, in prison. And it's like, you see that in Rambo, and that's kind of what the clones are. They're an army based off a mercenary, Jango Fett, of Mandalorian armor and background, and he's just the number one killer in the galaxy. They say, yes, we want that guy as the genetic template, and we'll build everyone to grow at accelerated speed after him, except his son, Boba Fett. He has him grow at normal speed. So he's a clone in the normal life cycle of things, but nonetheless a clone. However, imagine it's just a bunch of Sylvester Stallones in the universe, like everywhere. These tough guys who are bred to be tough, but they have that Rambo moment where they break down and curl in fetal position, and that's almost a feature, not a bug. It's kind of expected. they just knew they wouldn't last that long. They just needed like a generation to take over the galaxy.
Yeah, well, you're cloning genetics, but you can't clone people, right? Because even though they all might have the same genetics, they don't all have the same experience, right? Even though they are, being raised the same way, so to speak. A lot of siblings are raised the same way in the same household too, but yet their experience is so different for a variety of reasons. And so as much as you want to try to create conditions where these clones are all going to have the exact same experience and the exact same upbringing, they're not, right? And like I said earlier, humans develop experientially. And so everyone's experience, regardless of how much you try to make it the same and how much you try to put it in a petri dish, it's not going to be the same. And so all of these clones are going to have individuality that's just dying to come out, and they're all going to have a trauma experience, right? In the suppression of their identity. That in and of itself is trauma.
Yeah, it's just fighting against. It's like a pressure cooker.
Yes.
But pivot to Kristine too, as well. I mean, you have real world experience. Your husband's in the military. How does? I mean, obviously things are top secret, but do you ever have discussions about individuality versus the greater good and that training and how that's expresses itself versus him following orders and whatnot?
Yeah, no, we have a lot of different types of discussions about, I guess, the environment and the other people that are around him, and differences between different ranks and different jobs. Because I think they vary wildly, especially I think in ways that people who aren't in the military or exposed to that wouldn't expect. I think what really stands out to me is the similarities in kind of how the clones are like raised in this like very specific environment, like Stacy said, to like garner this like compliance and this orderliness and really like teach them how to be. I think about like training camp, whether you're going to like training for a specialized job or it's just general boot camp or it's officer training, like just this regimented period of really just high, I don't want to call it reprogramming because that's a little dark.
Kind of,
All programmed by one thing or another.
Right?
It's a euphemism.
they are being
yeah, and to like, right, and to get everyone on the same page and the same level of understanding for compliance, to keep order, to have everyone on the same playing field, really regardless of what you have to do. Mm-hmm. So I guess it makes me think of that, like just this very like enclosed, like specific kind of environment where you're like grown from the ground up. I think that we have these very like sensationalized representations in like movies and TV shows about like, young kids going to like basic training, and it's all this like just like, for like lack of a better description, like physical like strenuous trauma and psychological trauma, and really just like yelling and screaming and cleaning floors with toothbrushes and all these
Full Metal Jacket. Yeah.
Right, exactly that part.
So
and I think of other friends I know who've been in the military, and they tell me like stories about like when they had to, like the day they had to jump out of a helicopter into the water, or the day they had to get pepper sprayed, or the day they had to get tased, like just to kind of like have all these experiences that I guess are deemed necessary.
Yeah.
It's pledging. It's pledging for the ultimate fraternity,
It's
really.
right?
But
And you get to do
theory,
it
in service of our country, yeah. I mean, I respect what he does, obviously. I don't ever denigrate people who served. I have family members too. It's
the same double back.
It's necessary, but there's also a degree where we're saying, okay, where's that balance? Where is it just an imperial war machine, and where is it necessary defense and for the peace and safety and sovereignty of America and the world, for instance?
Yeah.
So, but it's interesting hearing that perspective.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely, as always, I think pieces of art, like Star Wars, do a really good job of representing our human reality, and I think the clones are a really good example of just the military war machine. That it's like the soldier, like we're almost like from a distance taught to look at soldiers almost like clones. Like here's like good soldiers follow orders, if you
Yeah.
haven't heard.
You don't
And
want to be bad, yeah.
right, you don't want to be bad.
Not safe to be
Yeah,
bad.
no, and just everybody's just like in a row, and you follow the rules and you keep order, and that's the way that you serve honorably.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's the exact message we're supposed to get from the clones, and it makes the like deviance of that just like stand out all the more, which I mean I think is nice story color.
Look in Star Wars of the real world. It's blasphemous to show individual expression, especially in a military operation. You're looked at as really like Satan in that moment because that's the one thing you're not supposed to do. There was an episode of Sopranos when he's taking his kid AJ to military school, prospective military school, and he's talking to the I think it's the major, whatever his rank is. It's kind of like orientation, and the guy's saying this is 2001. He's like, it's an army of one. We put focus on each individual so that they serve the core, the core, the core. And Tony's like, what happens when this army of one wants to go walk up, says, I'm not going to get out of the foxhole, and I'm going to blow the lieutenant's head off, And that actually raised an interesting kind of, point that spills over into this. What happens when you override, when you have that traumatic moment and you forget all your training, you forget that what was, ingrained into you, and your better nature, your second mind starts taking over. Maybe Stacy, you can speak to that.
Yeah. So I have so many thoughts about the military. Number one, first and foremost, I have the utmost respect for the risk that they take with their lives and what they do every day, and how necessary and important it is for us to have a group of people who fight for and defend us and keep us a free nation. So I'll just start with that. However, I have, as a therapist, as a trauma therapist, I have probably worked with, as patients, hundreds and hundreds of people over the last 30 years that have been in the military. I have people who have been traumatized just from boot camp alone, and all of the experiences thereafter. So, it's not, surprising, I'm sure, for you to hear that serving in the military and PTSD go hand in hand. And it's not just what you see on the battlefield that's traumatizing. It is the entire experience that is traumatizing, so much so that for many, when they come out of the military, there are so many agencies that exist for veterans. There are so many people in my field, social workers, that work with the military social workers. There's so many different agencies out there because the transition from that life into real life feels almost impossible for a lot of these people, because they are really trained to disregard everything they know and everything they've learned as a human being, and to really just dive headfirst into compliance. Their purpose is compliance. And it is no longer about individuality. It is no longer about what they think, what they feel, what they believe, what's important. It's not about them. It's not about their own personal human life. It's not about the sanctity of their existence. It's about the purpose that they serve. And it really goes against who we are as people and what we learn as people, especially here in our culture in America, right? We value human life. We are traumatized when we see something bad happen to another person, right? Unless we're a sociopath, we do feel. We feel when we see it. We feel when we see something sad, when we see something horrible, when we see death. It is something that traumatizes us. It's not something that we're naturally supposed to see or witness. And now you take somebody and you think, put them through boot camp and throw them into some really difficult situations, tear them down, yell at them, scream at them, make them clean the floor with a toothbrush, make them sit on a toilet while 5 different men pee on them. I mean, the stories I've heard are bananas, what a lot of these people go through. And not every level of the military is the same. I believe what I've learned is that some boot camps are more traumatizing than others. And, there's just a different vibe, I think, and a different culture in the Air Force than there is in the Marines. It just is the way it is.
100%.
Yeah.
And so the things that they experience are going to be more or less traumatizing, but traumatizing nonetheless. Big T traumas and little T traumas and middle T traumas. And T's and traumas all over the place. And so we cannot ignore scientifically what we know happens to the human brain during a trauma. It does rewire the brain. And so for me, as a therapist, as somebody who really dives into this, the neuroscience of our psyche and what happens to us in these experiences, I don't believe that traumatizing people in boot camp is the way to go. Do you really want to take a group of people and traumatize them into compliance and then put them out into the world to fight for us?
To pasture really
I
after that.
I don't think that is the way to go. I don't think that is fair. I don't think it's right. I also don't think it's effective. And then what you have after the fact, almost all of the time, and Kristine, I apologize because I'm very hyper aware of the fact that your husband is out there, and so I don't want this to be something that hurts your heart or upsets you or anybody listening in any way. But to talk about this for real in real life, yeah, these people after the fact are very often suffering. They're suffering emotionally because this is not naturally something a human being is supposed to experience, and there has to be a better way.
I think we're all on
You
the
know,
same page there.
I definitely do not disagree on that. And actually, I think that's a really good segue into our second discussion prompt. Just discussing veterans and kind of what happens after this, after like the military experience. Very similar to what we were just discussing. When the Clone Wars end and the clones are no longer seen as essential, after being created, trained, and used for war, many are cast aside as obsolete and replaced by the Empire's new military structure. Their lives have been defined by service, obedience, and brotherhood, yet when that purpose disappears, little is offered in the way of care, transition, or long-term support. They're left to navigate loss, displacement, and a fractured sense of identity in a galaxy that valued them only as long as they were useful.
Yeah.
Their experience echoes a familiar tension in the United States. Service is publicly honored, but support after services does not always match the sacrifices made. The clone's post-war reality invites reflection on what happens when people shaped entirely by military life are expected to simply move on once the system no longer needs them. If someone has been taught that their value comes from duty, sacrifice, and function, what remains when that role is taken away?
Yeah. Identity crisis.
Right? I feel like in James mentioned, we see this a lot in the streets of New York. It's very common to see homeless veterans on the street, to see them in homeless
Squalor
shelters
or
and in halfway
PTSD.
houses. And you have PTSD,
Get
and that
addicted
can
to
lead
drugs.
to it can lead to drug use, it can lead to mental breaks, it can lead to like as I'm sure you've seen like major psychological problems. And while there are there is the VA and like there are like resources in place, I don't think I'd imagine you wouldn't disagree that the level at which they're needed does not always fully serve the community that it needs to.
No. I mean, it's great that the services exist, but I think they need so much more. And I think that part of what they need, in addition to better and more funding for better services, I think that they really need reform on what their experience is in the first place. Because, it starts in boot camp where they're really stripped of their identity. That's what happens in boot camp, right? They're traumatized before they even get onto the battlefield because they need to turn this human being who's had a whole lifetime of experience into something other than a human being, which, like we talked about earlier, is not natural. It's not going to work. We're trying to create something. We're trying to take a human and turn them into a robot. And you can't do that. I don't see its purpose, and I don't understand why this is what we're still doing after all these years, but this is still what we're doing. And so you have a human being who's trying to conform into a robot, and then they go out into the world and they could see their brothers blown to pieces right next to them. It's not just trauma we're talking about complex trauma. And when I talk about complex trauma is so hard in these situations, especially since they've gone through so much destruction before they've even gotten there. their coping mechanisms, their humanity. They're taught that this is not the way to be. You're not being compliant if you care, if you drag your brother back with you and you risk your life and the lives of the other people in your platoon or whatever, just to try to save one person. It goes against humanity to leave them there, but it goes against what the military teaches you to try and save them, because there's a bigger purpose here. It's so confusing, and there's so much guilt, and there's this dialectical, kerfuffle of what is supposed to be important to me can both be important at the same time. What rule do I follow? Do I follow the rule of humanity and who I am as a human, who I identified as before I joined the military? Or do I identify as who the military taught me to be? And whatever I do, I'm turning against someone or something that I've learned. Who even am I anymore? So there's identity crisis, there's complex trauma, there is survivor's guilt, there's so much that goes on. And I think that even when they come out and they get treatment, it's really not enough to rewire the brain to a place of peace and calm and safety. Their fight or flight is so triggered and so sensitive, and they're so confused. It's so hard to transition back into reality and back into real life here in America when they've been reprogrammed, right? Full circle back to what you said before, reprogrammed into being some entity that only serves a purpose.
Well, individualism is totally quashed. I mean, and in a culture and a country that emphasizes individual expression, go into a Starbucks where you're trained to just order black, nothing in it, and there's all these options. Even that can set off I read a lot of psychology and war novels as well, and they even the tough decision or the tough dilemma of choice, that creates a Pavlov experience where it's ding, and they have nightmares of if I could just sleep 1 hour through the night, that would be great. Yeah. You see this in Jarhead, The Things They Carry, Tim O'Brien, Slaughterhouse-Five, Kurt Vonnegut, all these war novels, they all say the same thing. They echo what you're saying. They echo what my family said. And it's who am I after the war, right? You have this collective idea, and most countries do for any functional armed forces, but sometimes it can be over-pushed, and then you're just churned out, there's nothing left, you're just a dish rag. Then they're well, go out into the world, good luck, and it's well, you taught me all these things, patriotism, whatnot, fighting for the good. Now, I've fallen through the cracks, and in a way, that's a sacrifice on itself. You become a ghost after that. You see it from Vietnam, you see it from Afghanistan, Iraq, all of our engagements, really. And this really did start in World War II, the military-industrial complex. When you look at wars pre the World Wars, it was a bit different with standing armies versus militias, and, the Civil War, for instance. Okay, everyone, then you go home after this, you have a little training, but then you go back to civilian life, and it was tough. You saw horrors of war, but it wasn't like anything on the scale that we have today. For instance, I'll shut up after this, but my grandfather was a tail gunner on a B-17 Flying Fortress in World War II. Flew over Germany, got shot down twice, actually. And he was 20. He was born in, 1922. He served from 42 to 43. Was honorably discharged after a while, left, did his service over in Europe. He was never the same after that. My mom told me he did go to an institution for a little bit. He had a happy cheer with me when I knew him in the 90s. He died in 2000. But it stuck with him throughout his life. He never liked to talk about it. Didn't really envision himself as a hero because he was a tail gunner. He killed civilians, German women and kids who had nothing to do with the Reich, really. Whatever their opinions are, it's like Gaza today or wherever. Do these people deserve death? And at the end, he's yeah, I'm happy we won the war, but I was young. I just got into it, did what I was told. Now I'm back in civilian life, raising a family. I think of all the people who don't have families anymore. He never really wanted to discuss it, but that's something that's almost like a generational trauma. Not that I feel it, but it's I feel your pain. Yeah. I sense that. It was so visceral. Mm-hmm. And it's you see that every day.
Mm-hmm. No, it's true, and it's something that really always gets me with, I guess, with just we talked about development earlier, but really any military service across the world, that the age of conscription is 18. And think back to when you were 18. Did you know anything about yourself? Did you know who you were? Did you barely knew what you wanted to be? You were still figuring all that out. And suddenly, you're told, hey, you could, go serve your country. And, it's presented in this very glorious way. but you're suddenly put into these really horrific situations at this very crucial time of neurological development. Like, what does that do? Like, where do you come out of war at age 20? Like, where would one expect the mind to be? I had a friend many years ago who served in Afghanistan, and he was a Marine at 18, and he was like there during active conflict. He was a machine gunner, so he was in it. He was
Yeah.
absolutely in it, and he's like, you don't really know what to do when there's a 13-year-old Afghan kid sticking a like rifle in your face. You
Yeah.
just kind of have to do what you have to do.
What a conflict within you, because it's a kid, but you have to save yourself. And
Well, even
Right?
now, if there's boots on the ground in Iran, they're conscripting 12-year-olds. Our tax dollars going to
Saw
pay
that
for our
headline today.
citizens to shoot 12-year-olds? Yes. I mean, it's nuance, of course. I don't want
Yeah.
war at all, really, if in a perfect world. But that's even there's two victims there: the murdered child and the Iranian, and our servicemen who have to do that and then go back to see their
go
wives and their children
live their
after.
lives, right? With the
Yeah.
inner
Right.
conflict
Yeah, let's go get vacation.
of
Yeah,
whether or
I
not
Yeah.
can't enjoy it.
that's okay, because it's a child, right? You're taught you don't do that to a child, but then you're also taught at war
Obey orders.
you obey orders and you kill the enemy, but the enemy's a 12-year-old. It's, I mean, the confusion of and just the complete conflict of values right, that they have to face. But Kristine, to go back to your point, the human brain is not fully developed until it's 25. So at 18 years old, even though like law says at 18 you can sign for yourself and give consent for this or that, and you can join the military, but you can't drink.
Right? You can't drink. You can your country, but you can't have
Can't
that beer.
drink.
Smoke cigars and shoot. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, and there is so much development going on in the prefrontal lobe, which is what controls decision making, reasoning, right? Delaying instant gratification, impulsivity, right? That's where all of the major executive functions live, is in the prefrontal lobe, which does most of its development at that stage. And adolescence is bred for impulsivity. Like the adolescent brain is an impulsive brain that does not have full development, that does not have a full sense of self. Metacognition is only really just starting to develop. What do you think? Who are you? What are you doing? And now the development of that brain, that the most fragile years of developing really who you are as a person, is completely clouded by this experience that they signed up for without even being able to fully scientifically know what the ramifications of that decision is even going to be.
That's
Yeah.
interesting you bring that up because Christine's husband, he's in his 30s.
Yes.
So he voluntarily signed up. In a way, it's self-sacrifice because he's like, there's a chance I could lose my life. Sorry, there's a chance I could lose my mind. Right? That's the bravery of him,
Yeah.
his courage to say this. I'm rolling the dice on this for the greater good. So he's kind of almost a different category versus younglings, like younglings 12 to 18 even, or even clones now. Think of that. That's what I like what George Lucas and Dave Filoni do is they play with the Clone Wars. They make a seven, has more screen time than anything, a 7-season series plus Bad Batch on clones alone because it's a commentary. It's NPCs per se. And that's not denigrating our troops. What I'm saying is that's how the top brass, the top, the power players, the Sidious, the Sith, how they look at it. They're like, these are the pawns I'm going to use. They won't have individual expression. They're clones. They're NPCs. They're nothing. They're not human. And I love that Star Wars literally manifests that. It's a literal manifestation of what is kind of going on to some degree, or behind the curtains here.
Yeah.
It's really quite prescient.
Well, I think what's really cool that gets quite represented, I think, with just the I guess mass compliance, I think is really well represented during Order 66.
Yeah.
Just the concept of
Do your duty.
I'm going to this the guy in charge is going to give this overarching order,
In
and
the books.
yeah, and you're just expected to comply to it. Obviously, there's a lot of nuanced factors of the chip that's making them obey whether they want to or not, and of course the variables of some fighting against it. There were those that like learned about it beforehand and were able to like do things that were able to combat it. And you saw all those nuanced stories playing out over the different like points of IP, from the movies to the books to the TV show. But it's, I mean, but what's the difference between getting an order from your general of
Yeah.
like, oh, like this is like what we're gonna go. We're gonna go in here. This is the bad guy. This is what we need to do. I mean,
You're
are they not just kind of taking it at face value?
You know,
you're
That
gonna
this is
drop a
what my
nuke.
yeah, this
You're
is
gonna
what my
drop a nuke
superior
on
officer
Hiroshima
said we're
today.
doing, so this is what we're
yeah,
doing.
they did.
I mean, what's the difference between that and like, hey, turns out the Jedi aren't the good guys. Pew pew.
Yeah,
Yeah, shoot first, ask questions later. Just do it. That's
Literally.
Palpatine's. Do it.
Yeah.
Just do it. Yeah,
Do it.
that's his-
so
Get him.
they did studies after World War II to try to have a deeper understanding of how these soldiers, the SS, were able to follow these horrendous orders of murdering, women and children and innocent people and ripping families apart, the horrors of the Holocaust, and how they were able to get so many people to comply. And they did these studies, and you can look them up. It was just so crazy. I've seen some videos where they'll like, trick somebody into thinking that somebody's in the next room and you're pushing a button to electrocute them, and the person in the other room is screaming, ah,
Yeah.
like they're in pain, and the person giving the order says, just keep pushing the button. And people they're upset. You can see that clearly they're getting anxious, but the discomfort of not following the order and the need to follow the order is stronger, right? The discomfort of not following the order is more uncomfortable than knowing you're hurting that other person and having to stand up and say, no, damn it, I'm not going to keep pushing this button. That's ridiculous. The person in the other room's in pain. I'm not doing this. More people would just like,
Well, that was the exact dilemma at the end of The Dark Knight when Joker gives the boat passengers the buttons. It's like you blow them up or they blow you up.
Yeah.
In a way, it takes one to say no, and then
right.
tensions are cool. But there is some.
The need
You don't
to
know what's gonna
comply, the
happen.
fear,
Your
what
head-
will happen to me if I don't comply? What's, the need,
Right, what are the
what are the
consequences?
consequences? The need to follow the order became the stronger. Like that was more powerful than the discomfort of knowing I'm hurting another person. So even though that's so uncomfortable for me, it's, you know what, they're telling me to do it. It just
It's
Yeah.
incentive structure.
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
much
if anything, like
responsibility.
it's like there must be a part of the brain that almost has to justify it. Like, well, I didn't give the order.
Yes.
Like it's not my fault. I'm being ordered to push the button.
I'm being good. I'm complying. The person in charge is telling me to do it. I need to comply. And the fact that I'm complying makes me good. So I'm not doing anything
Right.
wrong. I'm not responsible for what's happening to the person in the other room. I don't like it. I'm uncomfortable,
Right.
but it's not my
But
fault. I'm complying. I'm being
right.
good.
Right, good soldiers follow orders.
Exactly.
But it's not just in the field of warfare. You take these clones, right? This NPC idea, this brainwashing, really.
Yeah.
There's genocides all over the world. There's Holocaust today. There's
Yeah.
Holocaust in Soviet Russia, but it was kind of put under the rug. But look how many, not just Jews, but many people, millions really,
Yeah.
just starvation alone. But they would incentivize you, starting in the Lenin Stalin era, they would say, you tell on your parents if they're going against the state now, and what will happen to you will be much worse if you don't. So rat out Uncle Bob, all these people, and it created a snowball
It's
effect.
survival.
And that's kind of what it's survival. But you see that with the clones too. It's the ultimate expression of that. But look at Boba Fett, right? So he was an unaltered clone. He was the genetic template Jango Fett, the bounty hunter for all the clone army. Like I said, he had one son who was not at accelerated speed and had free will
Yep.
and no chip. Boba Fett had a totally different experience. His ultimate individual expression was the family. He wanted to emulate his father. And to the point where he became him, he was a clone of him, and in his profession too, he became a bounty hunter, donned the same if not similar armor, same weapon, same ship, the Slave One. So it's really interesting how if individual expression is left to the ultimate degree for a clone, where they gravitate towards it's family, it's heirlooms, it's tradition, it's
Yeah.
it's inheritance versus I'm without a purpose now. I'm just gonna rot like an Obi-Wan. There was that lone clone who was just he was like a Vietnam vet, and he was just like, you got any credits? And Obi-Wan's like, oh, the Clone Wars, so terrible, you know, like that's exactly what it was.
Good
Yeah.
accent. That was excellent.
You don't want
No, but
to remember the
it's
Clone Wars.
it's true. It's when so when the Galactic Empire took over and like Chancellor Palpatine became Emperor
Yeah.
Palpatine, one of the first things he did was dub the clone army to be obsolete and brought in a whole new military structure, and then you had what we would like later, or I guess before,
Force
knew to
conscription.
be stormtroopers. And the clones were essentially like they were kind of retired, and I think eventually once the New Republic came in, there was like an attempt at some sort of like a retirement package.
For like
But I
Rex
mean,
and those who lived, yeah, who
yeah.
survived, old men.
But also think about like just the scale. There were millions of clones. Like the order started at what, like a million with like several more
With new
million
batch
to
on the
be
way, yes.
yeah, it's several more million, like to be. No, I think it started at like maybe 500,000 with a million more on the way, and then
Uh-huh.
like part of the way through the Clone Wars, the Senate like ordered like 4 or 5 million more to
Oh, yeah.
like to
It,
be
it
like
they grew
grown,
over 10 years and were utilized for only 3. Think about it. They
right?
only had a 13-year span where they really just a 3-year window where they were needed. Pump the gas like a Red Bull and then just like be done with them. That was the whole
Yeah.
plan. They were meant to be expendable.
Yeah, and if it was double age acceleration, that puts them at what 26 by the time they're dubbed obsolete.
Yeah, yeah, basically. And
Mm.
well, it's interesting because quick aside, I'll do this in like 30 seconds. The clone idea, it was in the original Star Wars movie when Obi-Wan says to Luke, I knew your father, we fought together in the Clone Wars, and that's all that was. We didn't know what that was. It was just a throwaway line. Timothy Zahn in the 1991 to 1993 Thrawn novels fleshed that out. He insinuated it was an invasion of clones, basically, and the Republic had to fight it off. But that was kind of softly retconned, and ultimately, cloning was a factor in that. There was an insane Jedi, Joris Sabath, I think it's called. His name is from the Republic. He was a clone, and he was trying to take Luke and Leia under his tutelage. He didn't have accelerated growing, but because he was grown too fast, like in the incubation,
Hmm.
he lost his mind and it made unstable. So they're like, we need to grow them for 10 years so they don't lose their mind. That fast growth, their brain development, their nurture, their psyche, it just shatters. And he was a mad Jedi, really, even to the point where they were building a cloning facility on Tantus, and that's where Emperor Palpatine stole. So the grand architect of all this, in the end, after he died in Return of the Jedi, he went into a clone's body. He cloned himself. Snoke was that in the new trilogy. They've been playing with cloning for a while, and even these grand architects who are not NPCs, they rely on the means of cloning, and that's an ethical issue we weigh. Like, what is a human? Do you if there's a clone of me, is he me? He's his own autonomous brain, yeah, but is he my soul? Is he? It raises so many issues, and that's what Star Wars kind of. I think about this and like Tony Soprano in a bathrobe a lot.
Right.
These are the two things I think about. They're just so fascinating to me. The clones are like,
In
yeah,
equal measure.
Yeah.
Like
yeah,
bathrobe, Star
It's a
Wars.
lot.
Gabagool.
50
It's a
50.
lot to
It's
think
a
about, right? I mean, the reality
it's a
is,
lot.
right? It's like it's if there's a clone of you, it's just you having a different experience. Like, how do you
It's
turn
a different
out?
person.
Right? How do you turn
Yeah.
out? Right? Living a
He
different
could he
life.
could sleep with my wife, and that's not me. That
Right.
I would say you cheated on
I
me.
There's
can't
been
believe
movies like that. I
Yeah.
can't think of what they are right now, but I
Yeah.
know I've seen movies where that happens.
Usually it's with twins, but there's clones, right? Or
right?
there was that sister. They were on that Are You Afraid of the Dark episode. It's like, haha, I'm the real one. Yeah, it was
Oh, I
crazy.
forgot about that.
Yeah, they've been playing with doubles and body snatchers. We could do Invasion of the Body Snatcher. It
Right.
goes back. It goes way
Yeah.
back into science fiction.
Yeah.
But we're playing with that. We're cloning what? Didn't they clone a cow named Beefy or something?
Yeah.
We've
Well,
cloned
no, wasn't
sheep.
it a
We've cloned stuff.
lamb? I think it was a
Yeah,
sheep.
lamb. Sorry.
Yeah, it was a
Yeah,
sheep.
one of
Um,
those bad batch. Sorry.
so
That shut
real
up, James.
quick, I just have to say, in that scene in Revenge of the Sith where the clone army flips, right? Like all of a sudden they get the order and it's like,
Bad guys.
so
Yeah.
traumatizing. But here's what I
Yeah.
remember thinking the first time I saw that, and that was a long time ago, right? Because I saw it like when it came out in the movies. So that was what, like 20 something years ago, right? And I remember thinking, oh my God, like they were like helping the Jedi. Like they were forming a relationship and forming a bond and like hanging out together and like following them around and fighting for them. And then all of a sudden just flip. they have to turn around and start killing the people that they've now gotten to know and respect and follow the orders of. And like, what did that do to them? Like, that had to like be some sort of a mind F, right? Like for them. And I remember thinking in the moment, because this is what I do. And I remember just being like, oh my God, like that's it. They're traumatized now, because it's like, I now have to shoot the people that like, I've been on their team this whole time. And I lured them in and they trusted me and I fought for them and now I'm killing them.
You hit the nail on the head, Stacy. If you ever take a journey into the Clone Wars animated series, the last 4 episodes of that series is like the time of Order 66 and like kind of like the days leading up to it, and it just reaches in and rips your heart out on that exact premise of
that
like,
scene. I was like, oh my God. I was like, not only was I so upset that they were killing all the Jedi, and I was like, what? No! But I was like, wow, this is so screwed up for the clone guys.
Right.
They...
Well, after, it's like a Jedi trick, though. They just forget about it. Like, oh, that was nice, just following orders. Hey, remember when we killed the general we were past 3 years?
The ones that weren't able to break through the mind chip were just like, those Jedi, they ended up being bad in the end. They were crazy.
Jihadis. Yeah, they were jihadis.
That's crazy.
I was like, what? That blew my mind when I watched the movie, but then it goes that like Tim O'Brien, Kurt Vonnegut, even like treatises on war. Like you start to go deep. They're well read, as goofy as Lucas' dialogue can be. Like he's done the literature. He's read the literature. He's done his homework.
It's a wild ride. It's a very like obviously like dramatic and actiony, but it's a very emotional representation of what is ultimately a traumatic experience, not just for the adults and children getting like gunned down, but also for the soldiers that are put in this impossible situation. I think it's just a really poignant representation of definitely what people experience in reality.
Yeah, absolutely.
As Star Wars always is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And your prince, your hubby, he's a Rex. He's one of the good guys, you know. He thinks outside of from my discussion with you, he thinks outside of the circuit, you know. He's looking sort of at himself from the outside and understanding, you know, what it calls for and what he's willing to do.
He's a good cookie. I think I'll keep him, and he'll be home soon.
Yeah,
just in time for Father's Day. I'm going balls to the wall for Father's Day. I'm still making a plan, but
make a cake.
It's gonna be good. It's gonna be good, baby. Like I'll know if he watched this episode, if he sees that coming.
Yeah,
he's like, I had no idea. And be like, so you didn't watch that episode, did you?
I like to think the whole crew, wherever he's based, won't give it away. So he watches on his phone, and then they listen to like, wow, I love this. This is so relevant.
But this was wonderful, Stacy. Thank you so much. Do we have any final parting thoughts before we all go about our Tuesday evening? It's Tuesday. Yeah.
It is still Tuesday, although it's almost Tuesday. Wednesday.
Tuesday.
It's Tuesday. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't really have much else to say. We said so many things, and I loved this.
We covered it.
I loved this conversation, even though it was hard. There were parts of this conversation that were hard. I think, these are important conversations to have. The more we understand about ourselves and the human brain and emotion and what our experience is, the more apt we are to potentially move towards change and reform in a healthier way.
100%. Yeah, we hit it all.
Very well said.
Very
Stacy,
poignant.
Where can people find you? Your practice? Any other extracurriculars you might engage in?
Sure. So I do have my practice on Long Island Counseling. We are a big practice, and so we are there to really help people with all the things we talked about: trauma, PTSD, and anxiety, depression, identity crisis. We're here. Come find us at LongIslandCounselingServices.com. And I also am excited to say that I just started a new podcast called What Triggers You. And my website is whattriggersyou.com. And I'm just getting started, so I only have one episode I'm putting out, and I'm going to be working on it. But it really is an opportunity for me to have really more deep therapeutic conversations with people about what triggers them, to really help people have a deeper understanding of the trauma response.
That is wonderful.
Yeah.
Love it.
I'm very excited to check that out.
Yeah.
I think
Support of that.
it'll be a beautiful sister pod to the former pod.
Yeah.
And I wish you all the best of luck. I can't wait to take a listen.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Stacy.
Thank you so much for
Thank
having
you.
me. This was great.
Well, wasn't that just delightful?
That was lovely, poignant, dark in some ways, but the good sort of dark, as Star Wars is. But it really helps us kind of unpack and unfold the human psyche and understand society at large and ourselves, really. Our own minds.
I think it's really what I wanted to get out of this general concept. Just this examination of like the clone army and how it's just such a reflection of what's going on today. Like the conflicts in the media and just the military structure as a whole, that, some things work, some things don't. Like with the clone army, I think that there was a lot of intention, regardless of, Sith plots. I think that there was a lot of intention behind the creation, even behind the Kaminoan clone program. A lot of good intention.
Yeah.
But, it's in the good intention can still lead to bad execution, depending on the powers that be.
Better yet, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. That's quite true.
That's more poetic. Poetic.
Order 66 shows that. It's, you think you're just fighting for the Republic or the Empire or the Separatist order. No, it's like a demonic force in the middle of it. It sells people like chattel. That's really what it is. It is slavery. These clones are sold, it's a human trafficking commodity. They're literally sold for money to fight on the front line and become cannon fodder. So it's really quite fascinating when you boil it down to what that is there,
Right. Right. What's the difference between going AWOL and a runaway slave?
Right. And if you look at the clones as slaves, in a way they are, because their own identity is stripped from them. They're shackled to conformity. It's a lot to unpack, but it's there. We unpacked it.
You know what? Save it for the Substack, James. We're going to
sure.
throw that bonus material in there. No, this was great. Thank you so much again to Stacy for joining us. This fantastic conversation, really A1. To wrap things up for the evening, as always, please check us out in all the places. mindtheforce.com. Check us out on the socials, the Instagram, the Facebook, the Blue Sky. Check out Substack for any and all bonus material. If you want to get your read on for all the things we didn't talky about today, shoot us an email at mindtheforcepodcast@gmail.com for all your big thoughts, feels, smoke and whatnot. Let us know what you think about the clone army. And
or clones in the larger cultural, discussion. I think to continue the conversation, off the podcast, it'd be great if you guys do want to discuss anything such as like how big, clones are in science fiction. And that explosion in the 90s, there was the clone saga in Spider-Man, which everyone hated. Just as people hated Attack of the Clones. There's something about clones. They even do a lot of op-eds that say, don't send in the clones. Simpsons did it, DuckTales, there's all that stuff. So if you guys want to carry the conversation over to not just the psyche, but the cultural sort of resonance there with cloning and its implications today, scientifically, culturally, that's just a starting point. I would just, roll the ball that way.
And see, this is how James gets off on a Friday night. Like, this is what you guys need to do. Don't let him be lonely in Vegas.
Pizza and clones, yeah. You guys are keeping me alive.
Like, don't send in the clones. Where are the clones?
We're just cloning around.
We're just shut up. Okay, enough of the puns. We're done. The podcast is done. On that note, we will see you lovely people next time. Thank you again for joining us on Mind the Force. See you next time, and stay mindful. And may the 4th be with you.
And may the 4th be with you.